The day you say no will be the day everything begins to change. This sentence might sound simple, but it carries a silent earthquake. Because the no we're talking about here is not a rejection. It's not a barrier, much less an attack. It's an act of inner rescue. It's the moment you stop abandoning yourself to please the world. It's the instant you choose to protect yourself, even if that costs someone's approval. We live in strange times, times in which being constantly available has become a distorted virtue. You reply quickly, then you're attentive. You say yes to everything, then you're generous. But what if that's slowly killing your mental health? What if behind that behavior there's a deep fear of being forgotten? Carl Jung, with his disarming clarity, said, "What we deny in ourselves controls us from within." And that sentence echoes every time you feel like you're living more for others than for yourself. Every time you ignore your own will, your pain, your truth. The world taught us that saying no is a selfish act. But no one warned us that saying yes all the time can be an act of self-betrayal. And that's why in this video we're going to walk together through something deep, the transformative power of setting boundaries, of recognizing your own desires, and of giving yourself permission not to be available all the time, because maybe being accessible to everyone at any time is exactly what's keeping you away from what's most precious and sacred: yourself. How many times have you answered a call even when you were exhausted? How many times have you replied to a message feeling like it was draining you inside? How many times have you said yes while deep down your entire body was begging for a no? These small acts, repeated day after day, build an invisible but devastating pattern. And that pattern has a name: self-abandonment. Self-abandonment is the silent act of putting yourself aside, of ignoring your own needs, your own boundaries, your own signs of exhaustion, just to attend to others. And the worst part, often you do this believing you're being generous, that you're doing the right thing. But the truth is harsher than it seems. Being constantly available to everyone and all the time is not proof of love. It's a muffled cry for recognition. It's a desperate attempt not to be forgotten. It's an unconscious plea to be validated, accepted, loved. On the surface, it may look like empathy. It may look like care, altruism, kindness. But deep down, this constant availability is a defense mechanism and a survival instinct of a soul that fears not being loved for who it truly is. A soul that learned to overgive just to avoid the risk of rejection. Carl Jung, in his profound analysis of the human psyche, warns us that what we deny in ourselves, what we don't acknowledge, what we hide, what we pretend doesn't exist, ends up controlling us from within. And what happens when you deny your own exhaustion day after day? When you pretend everything is fine just to avoid conflict or disappointing others? What happens is that you become an automatic presence, predictable, invisible. You become that person everyone knows will always be there. And because of that, you begin to be overlooked. There's a cruel paradox here. The more you show up for others, the more absent you become from yourself. The more you give, without boundaries, the further you drift from your own essence. And that distance slowly consumes you. The cost of being constantly available is high, much higher than it seems. You lose your peace. You lose your individuality. You lose your ability to recognize what you want, what you need, what you feel. And little by little, you start accepting crumbs of affection in exchange for offerings that cost you far too much. The mind gets tired, the body gets sick, the soul screams, but you don't hear it because you're too busy answering everyone else's demands. Jung used to say that our biggest problem isn't the harm others do to us, but what we allow to happen out of fear of confrontation. And that sentence sums up the trap of constant availability. You don't take a stand for fear of being judged. You don't set boundaries for fear of seeming cold. You don't walk away from toxic situations for fear of losing connections, and so you accumulate small betrayals against yourself. You collect resentments. You silence your own will to maintain relationships that may only exist because you never said no. The problem is, no one teaches us this. No one tells us that always being accessible comes at a cost. That the lack of boundaries is not nobility, it's danger, and when you finally realize it, you're already drained. You're already feeling used, unappreciated, exhausted, and yet you keep going. Because you've learned to put yourself last and call it love. It's time to stop, to look at yourself, to listen to yourself, and to understand with maturity and courage that you weren't born to be everyone's relief. You were born to be whole, and for that you'll need to learn how to preserve yourself, even if it means disappointing other people's expectations. This is the beginning of true freedom. We live in an era marked by emotional paradoxes. On one hand, people post perfect smiles on social media, filtered photos, and inspiring captions. On the other, they carry a heavy silence in their chest that they often don't even know how to name. This may be the most subtle tragedy of our generation. People smiling on the outside and dying on the inside, and part of this silent pain is born precisely from the excess of yeses we hand out throughout life. Yeses that don't come from true desire, but from obligation, guilt, or fear of disappointing others. Yeses that work as bargaining chips for crumbs of acceptance. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever found yourself saying yes even when you just wanted to disappear? Have you done favors, given your time, canceled your plans, hidden your exhaustion, all so you wouldn't be seen as selfish? This is where the danger lies. Because every yes you give to others without listening to yourself is a no to your peace, your freedom, your identity. At first, no one notices, not even you. But with time, your body starts sending signals, your mind begins to overload, and your heart begins to accumulate silent resentments that you can't quite trace. Then, a pattern begins to repeat. You do everything for everyone. You're always present. You're the one who fixes things, who helps, who welcomes. But when you need something, the silence is deafening. When it's your turn, it's like the world vanishes. You're the first to be remembered when someone needs something, but the last to be respected when you take a stand, when you refuse, when you try to set boundaries, and that hurts you. It eats away at you from the inside, but you keep smiling, pretending everything's fine, because you learned that your value lies in serving, yielding, enduring. Carl Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is the part of us that's been repressed, ignored, silenced. It's everything we pushed aside in order to be accepted. But it doesn't disappear. It merely waits for the moment to emerge. And when you start feeling a constant discomfort, a growing resentment, an emptiness that won't go away, when you realize you're surrounded by people and still feel alone, it's your shadow knocking on your consciousness. It's the part of you that was ignored saying, "Hey, what about me?" That question may sound small, but it carries overwhelming power, because it forces you to look inward. It forces you to face the fact that out of fear of not being loved, you've been abandoning yourself. You've been living to maintain relationships that only exist because you disappear inside them. Excessive generosity without discernment inevitably turns into resentment. And unspoken resentment, the one you swallow for years, becomes physical pain, emotional anguish, spiritual exhaustion. True generosity is born from balance, from self-love, from respecting your own boundaries, and it can only be offered fully when you're no longer betraying yourself to keep others close. So the next time you're about to say yes, ask yourself, is this yes coming from my freedom or from my wound? Because there's a huge difference between helping out of love and surrendering out of fear. And those who truly love you will never demand that you abandon yourself for the relationship to work. On the contrary, they will encourage you to be whole. Listen carefully. There comes a moment in life when you finally understand the value of no. And when that moment arrives, something deeply transformative happens. It's not a miracle, not an act of rebellion, nor an act of contempt. It's a reunion with something that has always been yours but had been set aside, your own essence. When you start saying no, not out of anger or pride, but out of respect for yourself, the world around you begins to change. You stop chasing people, validation, invitations, places that only welcomed you when you bent over backwards. You see clearly that you don't need to beg for space where you can't fully fit. You discover that your worth isn't in pleasing others, but in existing with integrity. No becomes a mirror. It reveals who was really by your side out of love and who was just benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Those who walk away after your no were never truly with you. They were there out of convenience, not connection. They stayed because you adapted, stayed silent, gave more than you should have. And when that stopped happening, the relationship stopped making sense to them. But this is where a rare beauty emerges, the people who stay. Those who continue to respect you even after hearing your limits. These people are treasures. They don't stay because you serve. They stay because you are. And that kind of relationship is rare, but absolutely real. When you start saying no, respect begins to grow. Not just respect from others, but the most important of all, respect for yourself. You begin to see yourself as someone worthy of care, of silence, of rest. You stop emotionally harming yourself to meet others' expectations. And with that, time transforms. You feel the days become lighter, your mind freer, your body more energized. What once felt like a social prison, the obligation to please, now dissolves. Mental clarity returns like a soft light. You begin to notice who nurtures you and who pulls you away from yourself, who uplifts you and who drains you. And maybe for the first time you feel at home within yourself. Saying no is giving up living to please the world. It's the conscious decision to live in alignment with what makes sense to you. It's a shift in orbit. You stop revolving around others and begin revolving around your own truth. This process isn't easy. It requires courage, detachment, presence. But it also brings a freedom that no external approval can offer. It's in that freedom that you find yourself. It's there that you feel your true presence. And finally understand that you no longer need to trade your dignity to feel loved. Those who truly love you, love all of you. Even the choices you make to protect yourself. Even the no you've learned to say. Carl Jung said that the journey of psychological maturity, what he called the individuation process, is in truth a path of confrontation, separation, and internal realignment. It's not about seeking perfection or the approval of others, but about becoming who you truly are, with awareness, with presence, with truth. And within this process, there's one word that acts as a silent yet transformative portal. No. Saying no might seem at first harsh or cold, but in reality it's a gesture of clarity. It's the decision to stop the cycle of pleasing just to survive. It's the courage to place limits where there was once only concession. No is the seed of a new internal structure. And when you learn to stand your ground with clarity and integrity, you begin to reap a series of deep benefits, not only in your external relationships, but within your own mind, your body, and your emotional world. Let's explore these benefits one by one in more depth. Reduced anxiety. A large part of our everyday anxiety comes from the pressure to be accepted all the time. We live in a constant state of alert, trying to predict reactions, please everyone, avoid conflict, maintain appearances. When you start saying no, that pressure eases. You stop trying to be perfect for others and start allowing yourself to simply be human. Your nervous system thanks you. You breathe better. You feel less guilt. And you begin to live more lightly. Improved self-esteem. Every no said with awareness is like a brick in the construction of your identity. It's you telling the world, and especially yourself, that your will matters, that your feelings are valid, that you are worthy of respect. Self-esteem doesn't come from external praise, but from the ability to protect yourself. And every time you take a stand, you strengthen that inner foundation that supports you, even when the world around you doesn't. More authentic relationships. When you stop constantly yielding, something revealing happens. The relationships that depended on your submission fall apart, and the ones that remain deepen. Saying no works like a natural filter. It drives away those who are only there for what they could take from you, and it attracts those who respect your essence, your pace, your boundaries. These relationships don't demand effort to exist. They flow because they're built on truth. Quality time. By learning to say no, you free yourself from commitments that lack meaning, from meetings that drain your energy, from tasks you accepted out of mere obligation. And with that, something precious happens. Time begins to have flavor. You stop running all the time and start living with presence. Every activity stops being just another demand and becomes a choice. You choose who you want to be with. You choose what you want to build. You choose what truly matters. Inner connection. In the midst of the rush to please others, we disconnect from our own soul. We begin to lose touch with our desires, our emotions, our values. Saying no is like turning off the external noise for a moment and listening to your inner voice. You begin to remember what you enjoy, what you believe in, what you dream about. You start to listen to your body, to recognize your limits, to value your silence, and that reconnects you with a deep spirituality, the kind that arises from the simple act of being at peace with yourself. And perhaps the most subtle yet most transformative benefit is this. You begin to sleep in peace again, not because you've solved all your problems, but because you stopped betraying yourself. You stopped pretending, stopped giving in, stopped reshaping yourself at all costs. You can lay your head on the pillow, and even if the day was difficult, feel that you were honest with yourself, and that is worth more than any external approval. Saying no is at its core an act of love, not against others, but in favor of yourself. And when that love starts guiding your choices, life changes. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet and profound one. You stop surviving and finally begin to live. Now let's look at the other side. Every time you say a forced yes, you are tearing a piece of your identity, entering a cycle of exhaustion, planting frustration deep within your unconscious. Do you know what that becomes over time? Illness, burnout, existential crises. It's no exaggeration. Jung used to say that symptoms are the soul's efforts to be heard. And maybe that pain in your chest, that chronic fatigue, that feeling of living a life that isn't yours, is nothing more than a reflection of how many times you said yes when you should have protected yourself. Many people avoid saying no out of fear of losing others. Fear of seeming cold, of being misunderstood, of breaking ties that have been cultivated over time. Even if those ties are already fragile, unbalanced, or based on unrealistic expectations. That fear is valid. It speaks to a deep human need, the desire for belonging, for connection, for acceptance. But it's also that very fear that often keeps us stuck in relationships that don't nourish us. Relationships in which we are only loved when we yield, in which we are valued only as long as we are available, in which affection is conditioned on our silence and obedience. So it's important to say with complete honesty, yes, when you start saying no, you will lose people. Some friendships will grow cold, some bonds will break, some people will walk away, but that is not a problem. That is a filter. It is life separating what is true from what was merely convenient. It is the beginning of a new cycle, more aligned with who you really are. Because along with those losses, which may hurt at first, come the gains. And those gains are non-negotiable. You will gain time. Time that was once wasted on empty commitments, forced interactions, promises that never fulfilled you. Time that can now be used for yourself, for your passions, for your rest, for your projects, for your mental health. You will gain respect. Respect from others, yes, those who see your firmness and recognize your worth. But above all, respect for yourself. Because you will stop putting yourself in second place. You will stop allowing others to invade your inner spaces as if they were public property. And you will gain clarity. Clarity about who is by your side for genuine connection and who is only there out of self-interest. Clarity about which relationships uplift you and which ones exhaust you. Clarity about what you want to keep in your life and what should have left a long time ago. Saying no is like placing an invisible sieve over your relationships. That sieve doesn't remove what is true. It only filters out what lacks substance. It distances those who are there for convenience. It reveals those who are there out of real affection. It eliminates superficial bonds. It strengthens the deep ones. And most importantly, this filter also works within you. It helps you recognize when you're saying yes out of love, and when you're saying yes out of fear, when you're opening up out of generosity, and when you're giving yourself away out of a need for approval. Throughout life, we accumulate many relationships, many commitments, many obligations. But there comes a time when you need to pause and ask yourself, how many of these connections are truly nourishing? How many of these encounters allow me to be who I am without masks? Saying no is the first step out of autopilot. It's the beginning of a silent revolution that starts within you but reflects in everything around you. It's letting go of being a compulsive pleaser and becoming a whole person. Even if that scares some people, and yes, some will leave. But the ones who stay, those people will recognize you in your wholeness, and that has no price. So the next time something makes you uncomfortable, breathe, close your eyes, and ask yourself, is this yes saving someone or destroying me? And if the answer is painful, know this, that pain is your awakening. Now it's your turn. Leave a comment below. What was the greatest transformation you experienced after learning to say no? What kind of freedom did it bring you? And in the description, you'll find a reading list with works by Carl Jung and contemporary authors that will help you strengthen your identity, your boundaries, and your inner clarity. And remember, the world doesn't need you always available. The world needs you to be true.